Did you get interested in the subject of UFOs?
That happened at a surprisingly early age. I was 7 years old at a boarding school, and the principal of the school, a friend of his, had photographed video, an old reel-to-reel Kodak movie camera, had taken a home movie of a video of a UFO flying in beautiful blue skies, cumulus clouds, huge golden disc that comes into the picture and banks, goes into a cloud, and it disappears into this sort of wispy cloud in a way that would be very, very hard, I think, to fake somehow, particularly in those days with no computer-generated imagery. And it comes out the other side and then sort of goes off over the horizon. And I was, stunned and flabbergasted, and myself and all the other kids ran outside that night and were looking at the stars, and it just sparked my curiosity, a lifelong curiosity.
So once you got into government, and once you were there, you're basically there, you had to start asking questions like, did you wait a while? Like, how long did you ask for?
Sure did.
Hey, what do you guys know?
Yeah, well, for a long time I waited. Very rarely. I looked for openings. I looked for opportunities. So, for example, the stigma is so great that you're reluctant, obviously, to raise that issue. A couple times there were some natural opportunities. So one of my colleagues on the Intelligence Committee was going to Hawaii for some oversight trips, meetings, and he went to the Maui Space Optical Tracking Facility. And I said to him, while you're there, why don't you just check and see, do they ever see anything weird they can't explain and so forth? So he did, and Pete called me up and said, hey, you wouldn't believe this. I've got this videotape here, and it shows these weird things. And so I talked to the Air Force people. They sent the tape to us. Turns out it was totally unclassified. I showed it to Senator Cohen and some others, and it ended up on national TV, actually, but didn't generate any further response. Everybody just kind of threw their hands up in the air and said, well, that's interesting, but we don't know what to do with it. It was Ted Koppel's Nightline show that this tape was played on. It showed sort of 5 objects moving parallel to the ground, possibly in formation. They're in the atmosphere because they're burning, they're interacting with something. There's plasma coming off them, which wouldn't presumably be happening in space, but they seem to be too slow to be meteorites. So it was mystifying and difficult to explain, never did get an answer. Occasionally something like that would happen, but by and large, the issue almost never arose.
The issue is a weird issue because if you bring it up in the wrong company or at the wrong time, you could be dismissed as a loon. Did you feel that when you were there, like as a person who had a budding interest in unidentified flying objects and what have you? Did you feel like this is a politically risky thing to discuss, especially to discuss like in serious terms? Like, do you believe in these things? Like, what are they? What do we know? Was that an issue?
Absolutely. I concealed my interest in the topic for years and very carefully, and confided to a few trustworthy friends, had a few heart-to-heart talks with a couple individuals when I found a fellow traveler who was interested in this topic, but by and large, absolutely wanted to conceal that and not reveal that.
Did you know Clinton?
No, I did not.
He would be the guy that I would go to.
There's a request that came to me once that I think was from President Clinton, and it was one of the astronauts claimed to have seen a UFO out at Edwards Air Force Base, and it was videotaped, he said. And he described this in his memoir and wanted the president to get hold of the tape of the video. And Secretary Cohen came back to the Pentagon from a meeting, and a message came down to me to go to try to find this tape. And unfortunately, there was I got nowhere with that. The Air Force was adamant that there was no such tape, there was no such information. Anything they had on UFOs had been destroyed. So I had one of these situations that's very common in this area, which is you have just two apparently credible sources, but utterly conflicting, irreconcilable information, which seems to happen often in this field.
Now, being as you were in government and very close to literally the machine that runs the world, what's the general perception when people are discussing these things in Washington? What's the general perception of what's going on with these things?
Well, I'm happy to say that it's changed. That perception has changed considerably in the last few years. People feel like they have permission to talk about it.
When do you think this happened?
This happened after the New York Times article and subsequent press beginning in 2017, December 2017. And that sort of gave people permission to talk about this. And I've actually had Pentagon friends who said, you know, this is kind of cool. We don't have to go in the closet to talk about this anymore.
What do you think kept it in the closet before? Like, when did the stigma start? And do you think this was like intentionally sort of set up this way?
It was. It was the Robertson Panel Commission, 1953, and they concluded during those Cold War days that this was a potential threat to national security because UFO reports might overwhelm our air defense and communication system, and that the Soviets might spook the public and somehow manipulate this issue. So they actually advocated in writing that this issue be debunked and discredited, and the government went ahead and did so extremely successfully, unfortunately.
And this all started with the Project Blue Book, correct?
Correct. It was during that era.
So what was the gentleman's name that was running Project Blue Book again?
Well, there were different people.
The guy who went on
the astronomer, Alan Hynek.
Hynek.
Yeah.
And Hynek went on to become a believer. So he started debunking and was told, essentially, the way he reported it was that he was told to kind of debunk every single case. Everything he could find, whether it was swamp gas or, ball lightning, find some way to explain this away. But then once he left Project Blue Book, he started openly discussing these cases. And
I don't want to draw too many firm statements like that because we would see them being flat too. We'd see them perfectly stationary up there, regardless of the wind.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow. So what kind of wind are you talking about?
Oh, gosh. I mean, at altitude, you can have anywhere up to 100, 120 knots of airspeed.
What is that in miles per hour?
It's about 100, 130, 140 miles an hour.
So they're completely stationary with a 140 mile an hour wind?
Correct.
How would something do that?
It's confusing to me as well. Even if we had something that could just burn that much energy, right? Like if you had a sphere surrounded by a little rocket,